on, we are getting into Padma Shri Dr. K.N. Udupa Endowment Lecture. For that, I would like to welcome Chairpersons Dr. Nikhil Singh from Lucknow, Dr. Rajan P. from Calicut, Dr. Abdul Qureshi from Nagpur, Dr. Vidhi Diwagar from Ballari, Dr. Rajendra M. Shinde from Aurangabad. And also, we will be discussing on the topic diabetic food epidemic in India, about time to put feet first. The speaker for the session will be Dr. Sanjeev Kumar Gupta from Varanasi. We welcome.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Nikhil Singh, and I would like to welcome all of you for the K.N. Udupa, Padma Shri K.N. Udupa oration being delivered by Dr. Sanjeev Gupta, who happens to be my teacher when I did my MBBS and MS from Institute of Medical Sciences, BHU. So, Padma Shri K.N. Udupa, an alumnus of Banaras Hindu University, has made the largest contribution to the development of Banaras Hindu University in the post-Malvian era, which led to his being addressed as the second Katil Narasimha Udupa, descended from an orthodox Brahmin family of Magarvacharyas who served the temple of Udupi, Karnataka, who opted as medical carrier against the wishes of his parents. Dr. Udupa became a graduate of Ayurveda from BHU, Varanasi in 1943. His quest for knowledge has driven him from Varanasi to Mumbai, and after additional training, he proceeded to USA, where he completed his MS in the University of Michigan in 1948 under the patronage of Professor of Surgery John Alexander. Later, during the same trip, he completed his FRCS from Canada. Because of his Ayurvedic background, despite MS and FRCS degrees, Udupa was denied a teaching job. But in view of his advanced surgical training abroad, he was appointed as civil surgeon of the Mandi district of Himachal Pradesh. Excellent performance led to his being offered a better posting in Shimla. Declining this, he returned to USA to work with J. Elginberg Dunphy at the Howard University School of Medicine in Boston from 1954 to 1956. Dr. Udupa returned to India again in 1956, taking the post of Civil Surgeon of Shimla. In June 1959, Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru forced Dr. Udupa to return to BHU as Professor of Surgery and Principal of the Ayurvedic College. Dr. Udupa converted the Ayurvedic College into the College of Medical Sciences with the mandate to start MBBS course in modern medicine. In 1972, due solely to Udupa's effort, hard work, and selfless lobbying, the College of Medical Science was upgraded to become the Institute of Medical Sciences, and Dr. Udupa became the founder director. Dr. Udupa was an excellent clinician and a skilled surgeon whose scientific temper and human touch made him greatly loved by patients and professional associates alike. He performed all major surgeries, including mitral valve, surgery of the heart, traumatic surgery of the brain, and kidney transplants, including India's first kidney transplant in 1968. On his superannuation, on July 28, 1980, Dr. Udupa was appointed lifelong Professor Emeritus and continued his time in his alma mater. On 22nd July 1992, Katil Narasimha Udupa breathed his last after a fortnight of intensive post-operative care in the same BHU hospital where he himself had built and manned with so much love and dedication. The Association Surgeons of India started the Padma Shri Dr. K.N. Udupa Endowment Lecture in 2008 in the memory of this great surgeon. Thank you.
It's my proud privilege to introduce Dr. Sanjeev Kumar Gupta, MS, DNB, FRCS, FAMS. Dr. Sanjeev Kumar Gupta had an illustrious scholastic track record on completing MBBS in 1982 with distinctions in 6 subjects and standing first in Banaras Hindu University at Varanasi. His master's in surgery is also from the same institution in 1997. He also cleared DNB in 1988 and FRC at Edinburgh in 1996. Dr. Sanjeev Gupta joined Banaras Hindu University in the Department of Surgery after his MS, and in maturity of time, occupied many academic positions, finally occupying the chair of Professor of Surgery. He was head of the department and currently in charge of trauma care. During the span, he made 122 publications, out of which 70 in international journals and 52 in national journals. He had been a postgraduate thesis guide for many years. Dr. Gupta is a fellow of the National Academy of Medical Sciences, member European Society of Mastology, National Academy of Medical Sciences, life member of Association of Surgeons of India, Indian Association of Surgical Oncology, Indian Association of Surgical Gastroenterology, Indian Society of Oncology, Association of Colon and Rectal Surgeons of India, and Indian Society of Wound Management, Association of Breast Surgeons of India. Dr. Sanjeev Kumar Gupta had been honored with Professor S.P. Srivastava Memorial Oncology Oration in 2009, Professor S.N. Mathur Memorial Oration in 2013, and Professor S.C. Mishra Oration in 2016 of the UP chapter of ASI, and Professor Krishnamurthy Golden Independence Commemorative Oration of the Association of Surgeons of India in 2010. Dr. Gupta is a sensible and humane surgeon with sound knowledge and masterly craftsmanship, and liked both by undergraduate and postgraduate students, making him one of the favored examiners in Northern India. The president and members of the executive committee of ASI, on behalf of the entire membership of the association, feel proud to award the prestigious Padma Shri Dr. K.N. Udupa Endowment Lecture to Dr. Sanjeev Kumar Gupta. Over to Dr. Sanjeev Kumar Gupta for his oration.
Thank you, sir. It is a pleasure and a privilege to be invited to deliver the Professor K.N. Udupa Endowment Lecture by the ASI, for which I am very grateful to the President and the Executive Committee of the ASI. I pay my tribute to Professor K.N. Udupa, the founder director of Institute of Medical Sciences, a visionary who laid the foundation for surgical education at the Institute of Medical Sciences, BHU. The topic of my lecture is diabetic foot epidemic in India, about time to put feet first. The International Diabetic Federation Atlas 2019 has shown that there are nearly 500 million people between the ages of 20 to 79 years suffering from diabetes. The prevalence has doubled in the last 30 years from 4.7% to 8.5%. 11.3% of all deaths are due to diabetes, and almost half of these are in people less than 60 years. In 2019, 4.2 million deaths occurred due to diabetes and its complications, which is one death every 8 seconds. Nearly 80% people with diabetes live in low and middle income countries. Diabetic foot and lower limb complications affect 40 to 60 million people with diabetes globally, accounting for an healthcare expenditure of $760 billion US, which is 10% of the global health expenditure. India has 77 million diabetics, which is second only to China. 15 to 20% of the diabetic patients will develop a foot ulcer, and out of these, 1 in 5 will require an amputation. So much so that 85% of non-traumatic lower limb amputations are for diabetic foot ulcers. And 35% of the hospital admissions in diabetic patients are for diabetic foot ulcers. And these account for a mortality rate which ranges from 39 to 68%. The etiopathogenesis of diabetic foot ulcers is multifactorial, but neuropathy and peripheral vascular disease are the two key factors which lead to the development of diabetic foot ulcers. Distal polyneuropathy, peripheral polyneuropathy, which affects the somatic motor, the somatic sensory, and the autonomic nervous system, plays havoc. The sensory involvement leads to loss of protective sensation, which is there is decreased pain and temperature perception, which renders the patient liable to repetitive trauma. The autonomic dysfunction leads to decreased sweating and increased dryness of the skin, which becomes cracked and fissured, leading to callus formation, and this leads to the development of foot ulcers. Furthermore, the autonomic dysfunction also leads to arteriovenous shunting, which decreases the nutritive flow to the skin and thereby predisposes to foot ulceration. At the same time, micro and macroangiopathy involving the medium and the distal blood vessels leads to ischemia and perpetuates and aggravates the foot ulceration. Most of these patients also have infection, but infection is more often a consequence rather than the cause of the ulcer, but it does aggravate the ulcers and eventually, if it is uncontrolled, leads to amputation. There are other risk factors for ulceration. The longer the duration of diabetes, the more the chances of ulceration. So if the duration is more than 10 years, the patient is a male patient, there is poor glycemic control, there are other system involvements in the form of cardiovascular, retinal or renal complications, hyperlipidemia, obesity, smoking, they all are risk factors for ulceration. But most importantly, a previous foot ulcer or an amputation accounts for almost 38 to 50% of the diabetic foot ulcers ending with amputation. In our series of patients undergoing lower limb amputations, predominantly males were affected, 76% were males and 24% were females. In our patients, the age is almost a decade and a half earlier than what we see in the Western population. We have the mean age in our patients was 58 years. The duration of diabetes was 7.6 years, and there was poor glycemic control as evidenced by a high HbA1c level. Most of our patients who underwent amputation had peripheral vascular disease, nearly 2/3 of the patients. 50% of them gave a history of smoking, and 38% had previous amputations. So what are the management goals in patients of diabetic foot ulcers? The first and the foremost is get the diabetic foot ulcers to heal. Once they have healed, we have to prevent recurrence, prevent amputations. And the aim is to limit the amputations to either toe amputations or ray amputations in the form of limb salvage procedures. For correction of foot deformities is important, and correction of ischemia and glycemic control is equally important. Foot deformities occur as a result of motor dysfunction, and this leads to small muscle atrophy and disruption of the foot arches, leading to pressure points and at the plantar aspect, leading to ulceration. So the pillars of the management of diabetic foot are regular comprehensive foot examination, which is very important. Multidisciplinary care is the need of the day. Most of these patients are managed in a fragmented manner, which aggravates the problem. So we must set up multidisciplinary care units. Patient education is a key part of preventing re-ulceration or once the ulcers have healed. And also in the vast number of diabetic patients, they have to be educated about the foot ulcers. The appropriate footwear is important, because if the footwear is not appropriate, these patients are susceptible to trauma, which is one of the inappropriate footwear is one of the important causes of foot trauma. Debridement is the sheet anchor of the standard management of diabetic foots. We'll talk about debridement subsequently. Removal of the pressure on the plantar aspect of the ulcers, that is the offloading. Then The aim of the management is to keep the wound moist, for which a variety of dressings are available, control the infection, and improve the vascular supply. The American Diabetic Association has based a risk classification on which they recommend the suggested comprehensive foot examination. So in category 0, the patient does not have any loss of protective sensation, there is no peripheral arterial disease, and there is no deformity. And in this group, it is patient education, which is very important, and advice on appropriate footwear. These patients should undergo regular follow-up in the form of a foot examination at least annually, either by a general surgeon or by a specialist. And in our risk category 3, where there is a previous history of ulcer or amputation, these patients should be advised either prescriptive or accommodative footwear, prophylactic surgery for decreasing the foot pressures, the pressure points. Vascular consultation is mandatory if there is a peripheral arterial disease, and patient education. These patients should undergo a foot examination every 1 to 2 months by a specialist. As far as the multidisciplinary care is concerned, we started a weekly diabetic complication clinic in 2004. Our team included a general surgeon, an endocrinologist, a plastic surgeon, an ophthalmologist, and a social worker. This transformed the care of patients with diabetic foot ulcer at our institution. Prior to this multidisciplinary clinic, these patients were being shunted from general surgery OPD to endocrinology OPD. They used to come to the general surgery OPD with large infected wounds and with deranged blood sugar levels, and were referred to endocrinology for control of blood sugar, who in turn would send them back to the general surgery saying that till the infection is controlled, the blood sugar is not going to get controlled. But once we started this multidisciplinary care, these patients could get a comprehensive consultation from a general surgeon and an endocrinologist, and they could get the proper treatment. This is reflected in the patient profile. We admitted approximately 1,500 patients over a 12-year period, in which 75% were males. The mean age was 55 years. The duration of diabetes was 5.2 years. The HbA1c was 7.36%. And what is important is that the mean time for ulcer healing was 12.3 weeks. And more significantly, the amputation rate in this set of patients was 7.6%, which is considerably lower than what is described in the general population. Now, coming to debridement, this is one of the sheet anchors of the treatment. It essentially means removal of the necrotic and the dead tissue, which decreases the bacterial count and thereby improves angiogenesis and granulation tissue formation. It stimulates production of local growth factors and cytokines. It reduces wound pressure and facilitates wound drainage. The beauty of debridement is that it can be repeated at regular intervals so that the healing occurs at a faster rate. There are various methods of debridement, but surgical debridement is the best. It is more precise. It only requires few instruments, and it is cost effective. All the non-viable soft tissue is removed by a sharp dissection. However, there is a certain element of skill that is required, and bleeding may limit the debridement, and the wound may initially enlarge, but subsequently it will become better. Then there are other methods like mechanical, autolytic, enzymatic, but none of them are as good and as precise as surgical debridement. The other method that has been used is a biological method where sterile maggots of green bottlefly, which have a ferocious appetite for necrotic tissue, are used. But there is a reluctance to use these maggots, both on the part of the clinician as well as the patients, and they are expensive. Now, use of offloading techniques is the most important component for the management of diabetic neuropathic ulcers. Because proper offloading promotes diabetic foot ulcer healing, it has been seen that if the wound is properly offloaded, the diabetic foot ulcers can heal in 6 to 8 weeks. And there are various techniques for offloading, but total contact cast is the gold standard. The problem with the total contact cast is that if the wound is badly infected and needs frequent dressings, this cannot be used. There are other options available like removable cast boots and half shoes. And then there are surgical offloading techniques like uh, Achilles tendon lengthening and resection of metatarsal heads, but these are not frequently used. Now, as I said, one of the major developments that has occurred in diabetic foot care is the uh, availability of various kinds of wound dressings. The fundamental aim is to keep the wound moist, because now we know that keeping the environment moist hastens the healing of diabetic foot ulcers. And there are various options, and these options have to be individualized. There is no one fit all type of wound dressing. We have hydrocolloids, hydrogels, foams, silver impregnated dressings which have antimicrobial property. They are used for infected wounds, but they have a high cost. So the type of wound dressing will depend upon the degree of the infection, the nature of the exudate, and it has to be individualized. Now, coming to the other key component is the severity of the wound infection. Wound infection has to be taken care of. The infection has to be controlled. And again, it has been classified into grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 to grade 4, where grade 4 is a very severe infection. And grade 2 is a mild infection in which there is a superficial tissue lesion with at least 2 of the following. That is local warmth, erythema, which is less than 2 centimeters, local pain or tenderness, induration, and a purulent discharge. Now, how do you establish wound infection? Wound biopsy or debrided tissue should be used for culture. It should not be a superficial wound swab, because there is discordance between superficial wound swab culture report and a deep biopsy or a debrided tissue report. Quantitative cultures can be used because they differentiate between colonization and infection, but they are more expensive. Bone biopsy and culture is the gold standard for diagnosing osteomyelitis. Radioisotope scans again can identify infection, but they are very expensive and not easily available. Wounds that do not show signs of clinical infection, as I have described earlier, should not be cultured or treated by antibiotics. Now, this is a major decision because many of the patients insist and demand antibiotics. As I said, there is poor concordance between cultures of superficial exudates and deep tissue cultures. Therefore, we should take biopsy from the deep end of the wound or send the debrided tissue for wound culture. And as many as 2/3 of the patients with limb-threatening infections may not show any signs of systemic infection. Now, coming to the role of antibiotic therapy, no antibiotic should be used in clinically uninfected wounds. Again, this is very important, and it is a very judicious decision on the part of the clinician, because most of the patients will ask for antibiotics for improving or accelerating the healing. The antibiotics are an adjunct for infected wounds, but appropriate wound care is essential. For mild to moderate infections, which are generally monomicrobial, antibiotics against gram-positive cocci are sufficient. Severe infections, however, need broad spectrum antibiotic therapy till culture results are available. So initially it is empirical, but subsequently a definitive therapy which is based on the culture results as well as on the response to the empiric regimen should be started. The route of therapy, that is whether it should be oral or parenteral, is based on the severity of infection. Most of the patients with severe wound infection need to be admitted and need to be given parenteral antibiotics. The role of topical antimicrobials is debatable. Most of people advocate against use of topical antimicrobials, and in our unit, we don't use topical antimicrobials for these patients. The other important question is how long should the antibiotics be given? Generally, there is a tendency on the part of the patients to continue with antibiotics till the wound has healed, but no, that is not required. The antibiotic should be given till infection resolves and not till the wounds have healed. So generally, it is 1 to 2 weeks for mild and 2 to 3 weeks for moderate to severe infection. There are other adjunct therapies like negative pressure wound therapy, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and there are other treatment options like acellular bioproducts and human growth factors. So talking about negative pressure wound therapy or vacuum assisted closure, VAC, the prerequisite for using VAC is that there should be sufficient blood supply for ulcer healing. So ideally the toe pressure should be more than 30 millimeters of mercury, or the transcutaneous oxygen pressure should be more than 50 millimeters of mercury. There must be no significant wound infection or gangrene when the negative pressure wound therapy is initiated. However, it does not replace wound debridement and measures to improve circulation. The evidence in support of negative pressure wound therapy is level 1A, grade A. Now, there are tissue engineering bioproducts available which act as skin replacements. They have a positive effect on wound closure and decrease the healing time. The two widely available products which are very expensive, not being used by us. One is the Dermagraft, which is a layer of fibroblasts on a scaffold, and there is a extracellular matrix. And the other one is Apligraf, which has both keratinocytes and fibroblasts, which resembles the human skin. So in the fibroblast, in the Dermagraft, there is a acellular dermal matrix. Poor quality of evidence is there in support of these tissue engineering products. However, they are being used to hasten healing. Many studies have not shown any effect on prevention of amputations. And because of their high costs, these are not widely used. The other bioproduct that is used is the human amniotic or chorionic membranes, which act as a layer over the diabetic foot ulcers and hasten healing. Human growth factors have been used. They should be considered only if the wounds fail to improve for more than 12 weeks with the standard treatment. There are various growth factors, like, for example, granulocyte colony stimulating factor, which has been shown to have some positive effect. But the most widely used and tested product is the platelet-derived growth factor, which has been approved by the US FDA for treatment of neuropathic diabetic foot ulcers. The epidermal growth factor, the fibroblast growth factor, and the vascular endothelial growth factor, there is no definitive evidence supporting their use. And the NICE recommends that these growth factors should only be used in stable wounds with no signs of moderate or severe infection. So if the wound is heavily infected, it precludes the use of growth factors. So in conclusion, diabetic foot ulcer is a preventable disease. Education and screening of patients at risk of diabetic foot complication is important. Aggressive multidisciplinary management is essential for treating and preventing ulcers and lowering the number of amputations. Newer therapies are still evolving and are at best are adjuncts to standard treatment. I would like to acknowledge my colleagues, Professor S.K. Singh from the Department of Endocrinology, Professor Seema Khanna, who's a trained plastic surgeon and was giving advice regarding the plastic surgical procedures in these patients, Professor M.K. Singh, Department of Ophthalmology, Dr. Kiran Singh from Molecular and Human Genetics. With collaboration, we have carried out a large number of studies in diabetic foot. Dr. Shalbha and Dr. Kanhaiya, they were our PhD scholars, and Ms. Manorma, the social worker. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much.